Hey guys, and welcome back to the ASX Investor channel, and welcome to another CEO interview. Today, we'll be unpacking the story of Magnis Energy Technologies. ASX MNS are developing out a vertically integrated supply chain and playing really right on the forefront of this mega trend that we're hearing more and more about. We know that the EV adoption is picking up pace, but not only that, the green energy transition is really coming to the forefront of the conversation. Magnis have developed this vertically integrated supply chain. They've got a graphite mine, so the opportunity for production on that end with battery technologies, and ultimately are just about to bring online a fully automated production for battery cell manufacturing. We're really excited to be joined by Frank Poullas today. We'll be unpacking the ASX MNS story. There's definitely been a lot of recent news flow to unpack. Frank, welcome to the channel, mate.
Thank you for having us on. Really appreciate it.
It is a pleasure. Look, we were talking before, you had a bumper December, but I guess before we unpack all the news flow and everything that's really come through, it'd be great just to have that overview. Who is Magnis Energy? You've got really three components to the offering, and what's that problem that you're trying to solve?
Thanks again. And I think you sort of covered it in the intro, but in short, it's that integrated play, I think, that makes this story and what we're achieving really unique on the Australian Stock Exchange, and even sort of globally. When you look at cell manufacturers, typically in the marketplace right now, and the bigger players out there, they've all seen when you look at lithium-ion batteries, the major input is raw materials. So they are out there right now trying to buy mines or buy stakes in mines and to try to reduce the cost of the production of these batteries. So from our case, having access to the Nachu Graphite Project, it gives us an advantage out there. Obviously, our IP is a huge advantage, which is sort of the second part of the business, and then manufacturing the cells. But we've also got a few things up our sleeves that we're also looking at the moment regarding the supply chain of lithium-ion batteries, and potentially being involved in some aspects of that as well. So we're always trying to find ways where we can reduce production and also add value and generate value for our shareholders and for the company itself.
Plenty of exciting things in the work. I guess just going back to 2021, if you can just give us that current update of really where you've landed. Semi-automated production is now a big tick, which is exciting. Had that offtake as well for Nachu. So yeah, if you can give us that state of play about where Magnis is positioned now, please.
Yeah, so with New York itself, as you brought out, that semi-automated production began in late 2021. Which was a huge milestone for us in a number of ways. Previously, we've had comments out there regarding the machinery that we've purchased. These guys will never be able to get this up and running, and to actually get this and start producing actual cells from our plant itself using our machinery, and these are full-size cells. So produced from our plant, it's a game changer for us. One, it ticks the box of, can these guys get cells up and running from their plant? Yes, we can. That last box is, fully automated production, but the fact that we're getting the production happening with these cells shows that the machinery works, and we're able to produce these full-size cells. Also, when we look back at, and I've had, past interviews and, message was sort of put out in the marketplace, and we've always had this sort of question asked about, will you be able to, sell any of your cells in the EV space? We've always said that we'll only get these groups and we'll only get them as off-takers once we actually start production out of our plant in New York. So whether it's semi-automated or it's automated, we've started that production. So we've got, and what do we mean by semi-automated? Initially, there was a few hundred cells that were produced in the batch. I believe there's another 1,000 now coming in the next batch. So it's sort of, if I use the analogy with a sort of a mine, it's this ramp up period now. So we started with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, and it'll go, towards millions of cells annually produced there. So we've got to make sure, one, that the cells that are being produced and, they have no issues, to then, and the whole sort of manufacturing phase, and you then just keep ramping it up. But now we're able to, and so this is something that we've done now with the last batch that went through. We're able to provide cells to potential customers, even though we've got like a bank of customers who have been testing our product. That's been done from our pilot plant. Now we can actually produce and provide them with cells from our actual plant as well, and in that, are large EV manufacturers and large autos, household names. So that has sort of been the box that we've been needing to tick. So I don't know how, and it sort of came during Christmas and New Year's. So I'm sure there's sort of a large portion of the marketplace that's missed it, but I couldn't sort of stress the importance of semi-automated production enough. Like, it is a game changer for us, and it allows us to bring those top tier names as customers as well. And hopefully, they'll see the relevance of our technology, which I'm sure we'll get to further on in the conversation. But we think we've got some really great tech at the right time. With there's an explosion of demand that's out there in the marketplace. So that was the first probably key milestone. The other one, as you touched on, was the offtake with Traxys. So it's sort of, we've had this situation of this chicken and egg, where we've been speaking to financiers, and they wanted to see offtake. And so that's sort of now come through. Traxys has got some huge clients in the auto space as well. So we know that a large portion of our product will be going to that space as well. And we're also speaking to other groups, mainly out of Japan and Korea, who are also looking at purchasing supply of our graphite as well. We're also in the process of kicking off our bankable feasibility study. So back in 2016, we completed a bankable feasibility study. We're in the process of just updating that. So it won't be like doing the full study. It will just be a bit of an update. But obviously the market's moved, globally between now and 6 years ago. So we've got to update that as well. So there's a lot of work going on from all fronts. Along with, as I mentioned, we're also looking at sort of dabbling in some other areas in the supply chain, where we think there's some great opportunities, and where we can utilize some technology that we have as well.
Plenty going on in the land of Magnis, evidently. A lot of good launching spots really for the conversation, but I guess starting really with the flagship project at the moment, iM3NY. It'd be interesting just to have a little bit of think about the customer base as well. I know there's a lot of excitement surrounding the EV space, but obviously some batteries will go to the energy storage system, to other forms of mobility. Love just to hear some reflections on the current customer base. And as well, I know you've got around about $1 billion AUD of offtakes. And obviously, as you move towards fully automated production, it does mean that you'll start to see revenues coming through, which will start to excite investors as well, I think.
So a couple of things there. The revenues is key. Like, when you look at many of our sort of peers in the marketplace, locally and overseas, who are trying to get into the space, are years away from production or any revenues. We're literally talking about within 6 months, there will be revenues coming through for iM3NY. Right now, the majority of our customers are on the energy storage space, and that's obviously a huge market. And you touched on the two main markets, being EV and energy storage. So energy storage is the main sort of market for our customers that we have today. In saying that, it's interesting with, what you bring up about sort of the customers we've had in the past, also groups that have bring up, well, your technology doesn't have sort of the cell energy, or the nickel rich sort of cathode technologies have, and it's sort of it has more energy than sort of an LFP battery, but the LFPs aren't for, the EV space, and it's more sort of your nickel rich cathode technologies. Well, you look now that, Tesla's going down the path where LFP batteries are being used in their products. And we've got something that has more density and more energy by a factor of about 20% and higher voltage than what they have. Yet it has the same sort of performance attributes that an LFP battery has as well. So typically sort of the phosphate based batteries have sort of greater safety attributes, which we have, being a phosphate based technology as well. But we've got the energy that isn't at the level of the nickel cathode technologies, but isn't that far off either. So it's sort of the best of all worlds. And then what that means, sort of having sort of a phosphate based cathode technology, from a cost point of view, we're at the cost of an LFP battery as well. So you've got the safety, you've got the cost, and you've got the greater energy as well. So we think that, our technology literally ticks all the boxes that are out there. In saying that, the market is so large at the moment. Anyone who's able to produce cells has, a line out the door of groups who are wanting to, purchase their cells. It is just, there is that great of a shortage. So hence why I think we're in the right place at the right time from a market point of view, but also from the US point of view, where we've got a supply chain today that is 80% in the US, so US manufacturers, and the remaining 20% is either, European groups or groups who are mainly out of Japan and Korea, who are providing us with all the materials or all the parts required for our batteries, which is another sort of key attribute about what we are able to produce. But in the US, I think they've sort of lagged behind when you look at all the other sort of major areas of cell manufacturing, and the major ones being Asia and Europe. And you see the amount of plants that are coming on in Europe and the amount that Asia has. So I think the US have sort of lagged behind, and we want to make sure that, not only do we, come online with our plant that can produce 1.8 gigawatt hours of production, but the internal aim is to get by 2025 to double-digit gigawatt hour production. So yes, it might sort of seem like it's sort of aggressive, but that is what we have in place as our goal. And right now we're in the background working on funding, which also includes some assistance from the government in the US to how do we get to that double-digit gigawatt hour production. And we want to have that funding in place during 2022, where we can start placing orders right now, because there's a huge backlog of orders for equipment that's used in cell manufacturing. So the plan is to grow exponentially as quick as possible. We want to be a major player in the US market and hopefully globally down the track as well. But at least in the US, we want to be that huge player in there, and or one of the major players in there, and providing batteries both for the energy storage market, but also for the huge growing, large growing EV market as well.
So on the near term, longer term dynamic there, obviously in the near term, 1.8 gigawatt hours will be the focus, fully funded through to that. And then obviously moving forward, I've heard you previously state, up to 30, 32 gigawatt hours potentially over the next decade. Can you talk about what investors should watch for on that journey towards there, and some of those key milestones as you continue to grow and scale out?
I think from the first instance, sort of the first production's always the most difficult in financing, and also just getting there. So I think once we've actually ticked that box, which we have with the semi-automated production, but we take it to that next level of fully automated production, it puts us in a sort of a different light. We're generating revenues. We've got customers who are receiving our product, using our products in their products. So it allows for the financing of these projects, and it makes it a lot easier. Whereas I could tell you it was a tough slog to get to the point where we got to get the funding for the 1.8 gigawatt hours. But we're viewed as a startup who hasn't produced cells from their own plant and have had their cells in their from their own plant in people's products. Well, that's changing now. So I think, and then I'm sure you're familiar with the infrastructure plan that the Biden administration announced. So we're very confident that, we'll be part of that. And there's also the DOE's loans program as well, which we've gone down the stage of applying there for a loan there as well. So, it's sort of being in production helps us to access that funding. When you're not in production, you're unable to tick a lot of those boxes for a lot of those programs. But we're there now, even though, albeit at semi-automated phase, in the coming months, we will be at that fully automated phase. So what do shareholders have to sort of look forward to? Obviously, getting towards that fully automated production. And we've been providing monthly updates there with our progress. That will continue on. And I think our sort of last number was very close to the sort of 50% mark. I'm expecting in the next update that we should surpass that 50% mark, and then hopefully sort of around to the sort of later end of first half of this calendar year, we should be getting into that fully automated production and just continuously ramping up production levels. And then concurrently, we're funding scaling up our production in New York as well. Then the next sort of the other parties, we talk about funding, we're in sort of final stages. And I think we should be sort of, sometime this quarter announcing one of the sort of large institutions that will be working with us in assuring and helping us with our funding needs going forward, which will be, a globally recognized bank there as well. So there's sort of, a couple of things from production wise, and then probably the last one would be offtakes. So I think they will continue to come in. I think though, now with semi-automated production coming on board, you will start seeing some names, down the track once they've tested our, full-size cells that we're producing right now out of our plant. I think you'll start seeing, some globally recognized names starting to come in as well. So it's really exciting times for us, but it's taken many years to get to the point that we're at right now. It just hasn't happened overnight. There's been, I think, from inception of working on this project for New York, it's sort of been a 6-year process to get to where we're at right now. So it's been a lot of hard work, but a couple of major milestones are now coming through, and will continue to come through as we get into fully automated production and just keep ramping up.
And just to wrap that discussion around funding together as well, for those Magnis holders who have been following the journey for a while, they'll know that you've previously spoke about the potential listing of iM3NY. Just any updates on how that's progressing and any insights about how that could play out over this next period?
And that ties in with the comment before about in the coming weeks announcing sort of, one of the large global banks working with us. A couple of the options they're working on, probably one of the main ones, is being listed over there. And one of the options we've spoken about before has been a SPAC listing. That's just an option. There's other options around sort of private funding, debt funding and so on. But things will really pick up in the coming weeks once they're sort of officially announced and they're working with us full time. I think you'll start seeing things move there. It's encouraging. We've seen, some of our peers listed in the US who have, some, huge valuations, who are years and years away from any kind of revenues. And in some cases, their technology hasn't been proven yet. And, they're years and years away from production versus ourselves, where by the time we're probably, listed, there are revenues coming through the door and, with customers there purchasing the product and so on. So it's quite exciting from that point of view. And I think there could be, potentially a huge re-rating from a Magnis point of view there as well, when people can actually, do the sums and work out, what our stake in the entity over there is worth once they're actually listed.
So I'd love just to wrap this discussion around the battery cell manufacturing too. iM3 Townsville, how are things progressing on that front? It's something that, investors are still watching, even though New York's been very exciting. Any interest on the Townsville side as well? And has there been any further developments?
From our side, it's always been the strategy of getting New York up and running first, which will then assist us with our plans on getting Townsville up and running. Obviously, the semi-automated stage has been sort of a key milestone that we've hit. But once we've actually got revenues in the door, whether it's Townsville or any other projects that we're looking at, we believe it puts us in sort of, different stead to where we were previously. So the main aim is get New York up and running, make sure that's successful, and then that will assist us with, whether it is raising funds for any of our other projects we're looking at, or, getting those projects into production. In the background, we are looking at options where we can sort of somehow fast track production in Australia. And so it's something obviously, we would love to do locally. But I think that the sort of focus on New York first and making sure that's successful will assist us with our plans on getting a project up and running in Australia as well.
Perfect. And then I guess just to bring it over to the other side of the offering on the Nachu side, if you can just give that overview to investors. Nachu Graphite, why does it stand out? Obviously, you don't need that downstream purification, which is very unique, reduces the cost, reduces the energy intensivity, and how things are progressing on that front too.
Look, we've always been huge believers, and it's something that we're really passionate about, not only from getting the project up and running from an economic point of view, but also from the social point of view as well. So being in Tanzania, you're in a country that's, one of the poorest countries in the world, as ranked by the UN. But then secondly, we're in one of the poorest regions in one of the poorest countries in the world. So we know our project will be a game changer for the community as well, but also for the industry too. In saying that, we have got a product that we can produce a battery grade anode material without any purification, just, mechanical processes only. That should mean the cheapest product in the marketplace from a production point of view, so lowest cost quartile by all means, and then secondly, the greenest product as well, seeing that we don't have to go through those purification stages. So it's something really exciting for us. Going back on New York, we've always sort of, internally thought that getting New York up and running will be a catalyst for a project in Australia, but also a project, our mining project in Nachu. So I think they're all sort of, quite important, but, going back, it's, for not only the community, but which is, something that we view as, really as being really important, but also for our projects, for our battery plants as well, is getting Nachu up and running. That, it has some, great economics, purely because we can bypass that purification stage, but it's also really it's a high quality product. At the mine site, we're producing concentrates on different flake sizes, but some of what we call our battery feedstock at levels of around 99.5%, and that's just at a flotation stage. And then our product is quite large in flake size. So apart from the battery market, we've got other markets around sort of satellites and sort of, markets that require this really large, what we call super jumbo above 500 microns, that require that product that's in pretty much no supply in the marketplace. And they use like a synthetic graphite product to substitute it. And we can use that using a natural product. So obviously natural flake graphite outweighs synthetic when it comes sort of to the environmental factors that go around producing this product. So from what we can see, we can produce a natural product with the attributes of a synthetic product. So it's the best of all worlds.
And as part of that Traxys deal, you did have a few condition precedents as well to complete. The timelines, I think, were by Q3 2022. Can you speak about those timelines and how you'll be progressing towards them, and ultimately what they will set up if you do achieve those condition precedents as well?
So the majority of those timelines are around a bankable feasibility study completed, which we believe will be completed sometime in sort of, mid Q2 this year. By Q2, I mean calendar Q2. Then there was around some government approvals, which are pretty much all done from our side. And there's some sort of an environmental impact assessment done, an updated one. So those things shouldn't be an issue. In saying that, we've built up a really close relationship with Traxys. So some of those some of those milestones were as much put in for ourselves to make sure that we achieve these things by that period of time. But even if some of these things actually, for instance, did slip a little bit, the guys from Traxys had no issues from putting those timelines, dragging them out even further from day one, but we wanted those in there ourselves, but to make sure that we hit those timelines, and we give ourselves a goal internally to make sure they're done. So we're already speaking to groups around the financing. They will need the BFS, but in saying that, we've kicked off those discussions already. And as I mentioned before, there's also groups out of South Korea and Japan who are also evaluating our graphite outside of Traxys as well. So, as we've seen, there's a boom and there's a huge demand for battery materials right now. And you've probably seen recent price rises in the graphite price as well. So, being able to produce a product that a non-Chinese product, I think, is something that appeals to most of the battery makers out there right now, and especially one that is environmentally friendly product and has all the social attributes that we have in Tanzania as well.
There is so much going on in the Magnis Energy story. I guess just to wrap it all up, did you have any final reflections for those who have been following the ASX MNS story for a while, or those prospective shareholders who might be looking at Magnis now? Any final reflections and things to watch in this period up ahead?
I think the key one is around near-term revenue. So we're not, from a Magnis point of view, we're actually, through our investment in iM3NY, there are revenues about to start. We're not talking they're not years away, but we're actually months away, and we're sitting in the first half of this year, which will start by the end of it, start seeing revenues coming through the door. As I mentioned, there's some other sort of interesting things going on in the background, and hopefully we're able to execute on those and tell the market more about some of our other plans that we've got in the background. And as investors who have followed the Magnis story, if we see opportunities out there, we're not scared to take advantage of those opportunities. And if we can get involved in the supply chain as much as possible, not just on the anode side, on the graphite side of things, but being involved in certain aspects, which is where the major cell manufacturers are going down that path. They're getting their hands dirty in many aspects of that supply chain in order to, one, reduce costs, in the production of these lithium-ion batteries, but not only in reducing costs, securing their supply chain as well. So we're looking at a number of fronts. So there's a number of exciting things apart from production coming online, and what production means regarding some of the high-end off-takers to revenues coming through the door. So there's a number of things I think that will keep that news flow coming through in the coming months, but also will keep that excitement in the company growing as well as we get closer to fully automated production.
That is the Magnis Energy Technologies story. It's ASX MNS. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Feel free to share it out. We make daily videos each and every day, so make sure you've subscribed and turn your bell notifications on. Frank, it was an absolute pleasure to catch up. There's plenty happening for Magnis, and we look forward to catching up again and seeing how the story evolves. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks again for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your support.